Welcome to this Satluj TV News special. The Sikh community around the world, and particularly those who have publicly raised their heads above the parapet in recent times, have been facing a wave of pressure from India. That pressure has taken many forms, ranging from subtle indirect intimidation and threats through to direct and overt action in the form of transnational repression. That's a term now openly used by the US government in relation to India. In our series of interviews, we're talking to key figures in the community to gauge their opinions and indeed experiences about many of these issues. Swarnjit Singh Khalsa arrived in the US from the Punjab in 2007 as a young student, and since his arrival has built a successful life and career in Connecticut. The common thread running through Swarnjit's life has been an unwavering dedication to serving his community, which has seen him working in several public roles, culminating in becoming the first Sikh elected to a state council in Connecticut, that of his hometown Norwich in 2021. Deeply proud of his Sikh heritage, Swarnjit's list of achievements in public office is extensive, including the establishment of the 1984 Sikh Genocide Remembrance Day as a state holiday. He became director of the Sikh Art Gallery, created after the artworks of Sikh martyrs were removed from the local library after pressure from India. And he was given the Director of Leadership Award by the Director of the FBI himself for his work in embracing diversity within Connecticut. His focus has not only been in promoting awareness of the Sikh community, but common with the faith, he's dedicated his time in office to promoting all faiths equally in a message of unity. Swarnjit, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Angus, and thank you to Satluj Network for giving me this opportunity and inviting me over.
A pleasure. Now, Swarnjit, you, of course, hold a very prominent public position, which has effectively given the Sikh community a significant representation in state affairs and, in turn, influencing legislation and policy, potentially even at a national level. That's quite an achievement. Was it an ambition that you had always planned?
No, I don't think so. Anything was planned as such. I think all the Sikhs have one ambition to become a better Sikh. And in our Sikh history, we have a concept of Miri Piri, that where we have to be working towards spiritual enlightenment, but we cannot really ignore politics as well. So, of course, public service is very important, and I do understand that me coming into public service did give a lot of exposure to my own community, Sikh community as well. But I think most of the achievements is basically about recognition of all the work I've been doing in my own city of Norwich, or for U.S. Attorney Office, or doing presentations about Sikh community with the FBI and Department of Justice. So I think the goal is to stay engaged overall. And of course, it gives me opportunity to tell the story and the Sikh narrative to my colleagues, to my legislators as well. And I think that was one of the important pieces that led to some of the recognitions in this state of Connecticut and in America overall for the Sikh community.
And of course, one of your greatest achievements was the establishment of the Sikh Genocide Remembrance Day across the state. Now, that obviously refers to the events of 1984. Do you think enough people are aware of what happened in 1984 and indeed the events leading up to it, and of course the awful decades that followed it? Do you think enough people are aware of it?
So that's a good question, because whenever these kind of events happen to any community, usually there's a lot of blockage of information after these kind of events. And especially the place where these kind of events happen, they feel very intimidated by the governments who have done these kind of things. And they opt not to talk about it because of their trauma. So that's like a trauma response not to talk about the events. But after 30 years, I think it's the new generation who have seen their parents going through this trauma, who have seen their community not getting any closure. So I think that's the reason there's a lot of advocacy now to talk about the events of 1984. And when you talk about it, then you end up with the conclusion, no matter who you are, that it was a state-sponsored genocide. It was not riots. Also, important thing when we talk about Sikh genocide is we are telling the world it was done by the government and not by our fellow Hindu people who live with us. So we are taking a blame from the Hindu community and putting it towards the government who was actually the perpetrator of it. So I think the whole story needs to be set. The tone needs to be set, narrative needs to be set, and it needs to come out. And that's the only way to get some closure, just by some recognition. So we have worked on this in our state because our state legislator also, they didn't do anything in one day. They took their own course of time, did their own research, submitted their own testimonies to the state legislation, to the General Assembly, and then it was voted in House and then in Senate, and then the governor of Connecticut signed it. So it followed the whole democratic process to get that recognition. And that Connecticut is the only state, a matter of fact, that has a law enacted in the state for this recognition. But my thing is, we have achieved this through education. We have not, I won't say use word lobbying towards it. I think it's more of the advocacy of the Sikh community overall and the interactions of the community with the legislators. So there is some common understanding about the events. And we do have some witnesses also who gave their testimonies behind the scenes, and they met legislators. So it took its own course of action. And I hope one day U.S. will also recognize that at federal level, just like Armenian genocide was also recognized by America.
Yeah. Are you finding it is gaining traction? Are you finding your efforts are actually educating the communities outside the Sikh community?
No, definitely. It's very important. That's like the common phrase in America is get to know your neighbors. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we are trying to do as a Sikh community as well. So people kind of have our understanding, who we are, where we're from, why we came to these countries. And I think that's the main goal for this kind of recognition or having so there's better understanding where we live, about who we are. And as you know, in America, especially like after 9/11, there were a lot of hate crimes on Sikhs. So I think that's one avenue to tell the American people about that Sikhs had their sovereign land till 1849. Sikhs are from Punjab. And why Sikhs are even in America, because most of the immigration started in all of these countries after 1984 Sikh genocide.
Yeah.
And there's enough recognition by the State Department because they gave hundreds and thousands of asylums to the Sikh community members in America. So State Department already acknowledged there is an issue of Sikhs in India, and that's why Sikhs came to our country to enjoy religious freedom,
Yeah, I mean, certainly what I've noticed from my own personal experience is there is a great lack of awareness of the events of 1984. And not just 1984, which in itself was obviously one very highlighted event, but what led up to 1984 and, of course, the decades that followed, the dreadful extrajudicial killings that were huge. The numbers were involved were incredible. And yet, certainly in the UK, I know this for a fact, that so few people are aware of this. So I do feel there is a lot of work to do. That's obviously what we're here talking about. But, of course, raising these issues, they are controversial. And as you said, the Indian state were behind what happened. Of course, they are doing their very best to suppress and bury what happened. Are you finding, as you highlight these events, are you attracting any negative attention? And if so, from what sort of directions?
Definitely. I won't say these kind of things are controversial, but they are made controversial just because a lot of these things, like recently we recognized Jaswant Singh Khalsa, who is human rights activist for the Sikh community, who highlighted the fact that 25,000 Sikhs are missing, where they are, where are their bodies. And then he also went to Canadian Parliament, and when he went back to Punjab in 1995, he was also disappeared.
Yeah.
So we recognized him on the mural in Norwich, where all the other civil rights movement activists were from America were from. So when we do these kind of advocacy, our goal is actually education. And education, not just for Sikh community, but tell the world that these kind of events should not repeat itself anywhere in the world. But again, yeah, I remember Connecticut is the only state that governor has recognized June as a Sikh Memorial Month. And there was recognition also for Sikh martyr Swarnjit Singh Khalsa Pindramale as a civil rights movement activist. So thing is that these kind of things does bring a negative attention of Indian consulates and Indian diplomats, because they are doing their job to make sure only the India narrative stays on top of everything. But when these kind of things happen, Sikh narrative also come out that here's our side of story, and of course they can counter a lot of our work through their disinformation network and through their IT cell and try to defame us and intimidate our legislators or the people who are highlighting the Sikh narrative. But I think overall there is enough understanding in the world, especially with the recent events that have happened, that how India is operating its network even outside on the foreign soils. But at the end of the day, I always tell everybody Sikh narrative and Sikh story from our point of view, but we tell them, do your own research. There's a lot of record, even in our US congressional record, about the Sikh narrative and the various events that has happened in the Sikh history. So there is a platform where people can go and learn about the Sikh narrative as well.
Yeah, and of course it reminds me of this wonderful story I read when you came to, I would say, widespread prominence, when you launched a civil action for defamation against the Indian Consul General in New York a few years ago. I read what happened leading up to that, or the events of you serving papers, but I'd never found out what was the outcome. What was the outcome of that?
So basically, as you know, all these diplomats, because in America, of course, India is one of our, I won't say ally, but as a strategic partner country. So there is some diplomatic immunities which has been given to all these Indian diplomats. The reason for our lawsuit was that we wanted to make a statement that as a US citizen and as a Sikh, we will drag you to the courts. We will take the highest level of democracy that we are allowed if you try to defame us, because he actually made a mistake. His name was Sandeep Chakravarti, and he wrote 3-page letter defaming Sikhs on the letterhead of India to our state senators and calling Sikhs terrorists. So that was basically the reason we filed a defamation against him. Of course, now he's not consulate anymore, and they have diplomatic immunities, so they cannot be dragged to the courts and stuff. But we wanted to make a statement that we will not tolerate this kind of defamation for the community in large that you are doing.
So rather than face justice, he took the coward's way out.
Exactly. And we wanted to make sure we will not be suppressed. We wanted to make that very clear. This is America. No other country has jurisdiction on American soil. And we are working within the boundaries of law. We are working within democracy. And they have no place here to influence the democracy here or to influence our legislators here. We wanted to make sure that they get the full-blown picture. If they will do something, there will be some consequences. And as you know, over the period of time, now it's so much clear that how much transnational repression India is doing in America. And these are some of the examples, actually, what we are discussing about transnational repression. So it's not something new that just started. Of course, killing of Sikh activists were, one of the important thing that highlighted transnational repression or the plot against Sikh American. But transnational repression Sikhs are facing from decades in all these countries. And for all these years, we have been telling these governments what we are facing, but there was lack of action. But now, with proof and with evidence, it has been brought to the light. And we hope this thing stops.
Yeah, and they've clearly crossed the line, which for the benefit of the community, has highlighted the issue unambiguously, of course. Now, one other incident that illustrates really what you were saying was, I believe, a few years ago, you did donate various items to the Connecticut Library to memorialise the 1984 Sikh genocide. And that included a Khalistan flag and a portrait of Sant Janel Bhindranwale. And I gather that the India Consul General reportedly called the library's director and demanded that the memorial was taken down, after which it was, I gather, relocated to Norwich and now under the guard of the local police chief. Could you tell us more about that?
So basically, after the state of Connecticut passed the law to recognize Sikh genocide, and the governor of the state of Connecticut recognized June as a Sikh Memorial Month, calling Sant Swarnjit Singh Khalsa Bhindranwale as a Sikh activist, and explaining the history of attack on the Darbar Sahib as an illegal action, because they attacked their own citizen, will give opportunity for more learning for all the community members overall. And we thought, what could be a better place than a library? Because people come to library with very open mindset, and they come to library with the opportunity to learn something new. So we talked to the local library. Our elected officials at that time were also involved in the decision making, and we were able to establish that memorial. We put a portrait of a Sikh martyr on the top, and at the bottom there was a plaque explaining what happened in June and what happened in November, with the quotation of Sant Swarnjit Singh Khalsa Bhindranwale in it, that I don't fear physical death, but death of consciousness is surely a death. So it has a very simple wording that, what happened in June was an illegal action, and it was a pre-planned attack by the Indian Army with the bad intentions, because they picked a date where the complex of Darbar Sahib was jam-packed, and Sikhs were commemorating one of their special days. And it also stated that it was a state-sponsored genocide that happened in November. So we did our event very gracefully. A lot of state leaders, federal leaders gave us recognition that day when we did a whole event. And we placed a Sikh flag also along with the other flags. So it was not really a flag of Khalistan, or it was didn't say any wording on it, but it was a regular Sikh flag. This was a Nishan Sahib, which is outside every Gurdwara. And that was also placed. But after 3-4 months, India tried to again talk to library about it, and it was the same Indian consulate, I believe, who threatened the library that we will take your non-profit status and we will defame you and these kind of things. But nothing happened for a few months, and while the Prime Minister Modi was on his tour of America, library board decided that we would like to return you everything. But I think what happened for a reason, and I think the amount of exposure Sikh community got by removal of that, because it was covered by electronic media, NBC, Fox, which are one of the most popular channels here, Channel 8, and so Sikhs were everywhere, and the picture of flag was everywhere in the media as well. So I think our message traveled. But I'll tell you one thing, I think Sikhs win in this situation, because when that director was giving us that stuff back, his eyes were watery. And he was putting the plaque, I remember, on back of my truck, and his eyes were watered. And he was like, we understand who you are, what your struggles are, and it's very unfortunate that, something like this has to be done. But they still kept all our books about Sikh struggle, about Khalistan, about Swarnjit Singh Khalsa Pindrawale. So I think overall in this whole situation, what happened is Sikhs gained more sympathy towards their cause. And I think that was our intent. Our intent was never to be heads-on collision with India. Our intent was education. Our intent was understanding. Our intent has always been advocacy, that people understand who we are. So I think in this whole episode, it actually favored the Sikh nation.
And of course, it's a peaceful way of getting the point across, as opposed to the way the Indians are attacking it. And of course, by these achievements and your campaigning, it obviously attracts the attention of the Indian government. Now, we know for a fact that many high-profile campaigners have experienced threats, both directly and indirectly. Is this something that you've experienced yourself personally?
So, of course, there are always some fake IDs or whatever they have on social media, and there will be messaging against me and this and that. But, I keep very... was also awarded by FBI director for all my work. So I have pretty much good connections everywhere, and there's a regular threat assessment for me and the Sikh community overall in Connecticut from time to time as well.
Yeah.
So we are also on the chart of local law enforcement as well, that they make sure whenever there's a Sikh event, there is enough presence of law enforcement there. And I think we are working very hard with very positive attitude. And of course, I think every Sikh is a target of India. The way India has shown themselves, and especially in the recent times, nobody can deny a lot of these things. But we have been told to stay vigilant by the law enforcement authorities and various agencies. But we cannot live our life scared. And especially for me, there's no going back, and I can only move forward. The other important thing is I have to be in my community due to my role as a city council member. So I'm always within the community itself. And even if you see the Sikh history, even when there were two Sikhs left, Bhai Bota Singh, Bhai Garja Singh, I don't know how much you know about the Sikh history, but I'm taking the references of Sikh history because those are the real inspiration to all the Sikhs overall, that how we should act. And I think it's the courage that we have seen in our history and commitment for human rights. And I think all the Sikhs will continue that commitment, and more India will try to suppress Sikhs. I think that commitment gets more stronger.
I think one thing that I've certainly noticed, and I'm sure you'll be very aware of, is the level of propaganda, and you've already referred to disinformation, the level of propaganda that's being disseminated online, but also across the media, and particularly obviously the Indian media, presumably sourced from the Hindutva nationalists, who are obviously a very powerful force. Are you yourself seeing more of this? Have you experienced this yourself?
Yeah, their efforts have been increased because I think there are a lot of other advocacy groups like Sikh advocacy groups, Muslim advocacy groups, and even some of the Hindu advocacy groups who are working and explaining how this Indian nationalism is threatful to the democracy overall, and how these organizations like RSS and showing them equivalent to some of the white supremacy organizations that exist in America. So I think these organizations have become more vocal against what India is doing, and maybe that's why in the counter effect, India have increased their disinformation campaigns. There was a report actually that there are over 700 channels, media outlets that are being operated within America to promote Indian government narrative and their aspect of things and to float that disinformation.
I think sorry, go on.
Yeah, so that report, I think, speaks a lot for itself because it was not made by any Sikh group or Muslim group. It was an independent study done. And I think I think it's a good document to read, that explains everything in depth. And I remember one of the sections that they had in the report was about real Sikhs versus non-real Sikhs. So they were trying to make a narrative that people who speaks up for Sikh narrative are not the real Sikhs. So I think there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes against the Sikh community and the other minority groups like Dalits and even Muslim community itself. So I think all these organizations should definitely increase their efforts in what they're doing. So there's enough clarity among U.S. politicians and various different departments about what's happening to these communities in large.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because the purpose, presumably, of this wave of propaganda is twofold. It's firstly to increase divisions amongst the communities. It's divisive politics, basically. And secondly, it's to generate more hate crime. Now, you yourself have publicly stated the statistics about hate crimes. They're shocking, actually, particularly against the Sikh community. Are you finding that there is increasing divisions amongst the Indian diaspora particularly? And if so, are you finding any aggression from any particular sides?
So that's a good point. Of course, there was a media campaign done by most likely what our law enforcement came to conclusion was from the Indian government side that they put up media trucks outside our city hall of Norwich against Sikh struggles for freedom, against overall Sikhs, and showing them as a terrorist and calling Khalistan project of Pakistan and all these kind of things. So I think what we are doing is very effective, and that's why they are gone to these extents for spending money and putting up media trucks outside City Hall. So I think what we are doing is right for the community, and sometimes there are backlashes when you're trying to do something which is not aligned with the popular narrative floating around. But I do remember that flag incident that we just talked about in the library. There was an Indian organization called Gopiyu that condemned the Sikh flag and called the Sikh flag as a symbol of terrorism. I know there are other organizations also that exist in America, like Seva International and some of the other, like Millen Group, who have condemned the citation that was given to Sikhs in regards to April 29th as a Sikh Declaration of Independence Day. So that makes me think somehow, some of these organizations are basically proxy organizations for the Indian consulate itself or for Indian government. Of course, that's just my assessment, but I'm sure at some point Department of Justice will be picking up all these bits and pieces of information and putting them all together. But yeah, we have seen a lot. But anytime you do some work, you will see that, So I think we already know something gonna happen in retaliation, but we never knew that India will go that far and try to kill our folks. And they have done killings of Sikh activists in Pakistan, in Punjab, in UK, in Canada, and now the recent plot for the American citizen. I think they have definitely crossed the line and showed the true face that I don't think so we can call India a democracy anymore. And that's not really a behavior of democracy. And these are not just my words. In a recent hearing of transnational repression, various different senators, U.S. senators, also raised these concerns. So I think it has gone to the level, it has attracted the attention of highest levels.
Yeah, I'd like to drill down that point a little bit later on. I just want to come back to the central point that you're making here, which is about this wave of intimidation and the reaction of the Sikh community. I've noticed, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, that this intimidation that's coming from India, that's really ramped up in recent years, do you think it's actually having the opposite effect of what it was intended? It's in fact uniting the Sikh community. It's uniting not just the Sikh community, but other communities around it. And it's actually firing up communities against India.
No, definitely. I think advocacy have increased many folds after they have seen these kind of oppressions and repression coming in America. And many advocacy groups have started working with each other, which were not doing that before, because they understand that if India can go that far, that's something to worry about. And we have to be very serious about it. So in recent times, I've seen a lot of advocacy groups and the people who run those groups from various organizations and various faith-based groups as well. They have increased their coordination with each other. And they wanted to make sure that we all working towards the same goal. And many Muslim organizations, Dalit organizations, Hindu organizations, Sikh organizations, they have come to this understanding that whatever this government, Indian government is doing, is not really a healthy thing for anyone. And when I see in reality, like India will show divisiveness and make everything into a community issue and Sikhs versus Hindu issue, but there's nothing like that. Hindu people are given respect when they come to Gurdwara. They are cleaning utensils with us. They are taking part in Langar Seva with us, the community meal that we distribute. So at community level, I think there is harmony. It's just the way the Indian media will show everything and try to make it look divisive.
Yeah.
And they have done that in 80s and 90s, and they are still doing it. So it's not something new. I think it's just a matter of getting education that governments will do such kind of things if it goes against their narrative.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I find quite upsetting in many ways, is that a lot of comments on a lot of our videos are from Hindus, and they're quite sort of, well, they range from the subtle to the outright nasty. And it's very clear that they are victims of a state narrative that has persuaded them that there is a division in society, that the Sikh community is, I wouldn't go as far as say is evil, but effectively is a community that should be derided, should be marginalised. And we're seeing increasing levels of that, which is why I think the divisive nature of all this is particularly the evil that is happening. But of course, the central tenet of all this, what all this really focuses down, certainly to me as an observer, is it's the issue of Khalistan. Do you think all that's happening, all this transnational repression, the repression that's happened in Punjab domestically over decades, but of course recently as well, do you think it's actually increasing support for Khalistan?
So here's the thing: when you will oppress something which is pure, which is related to the justice of any community, of course, more you suppress it, more it will go up. And it's not just this issue; any other issue in the world will do the same thing because there's backing of real people behind the issue. India always portrays there are 4 or 5 people who are raising the issue of Khalistan. But with referendum coming into play and hundreds and thousands of Sikhs going and voting in referendum definitely damage their narrative that they are not 4 or 5 people. It's the community itself who wants to get their sovereignty back. And my other thing is, if somebody is doing something within the boundaries of law, within democracy, and when you try to stop them from doing that, overall you ruin your reputation in the world. And that's exactly what India did. Sikhs are working in a very smart way, educated way, under the guidelines of United Nations. But again, Khalistan or Free Punjab or Sikh sovereignty is always a threat to India because they are using Punjab as their colony. They are taking the resources of Punjab. Punjab is not getting paid. They're using the water of Punjab. Punjab is not getting paid. And I think that's the thing they want to continue doing it, using the resources of Punjab. And they know if Punjab become a sovereign nation, then it will be very hard for them to do something like that.
Can I ask you, and it comes back to almost a philosophical question, there is clearly a deep fear of the Indian state about Punjab and the Sikh community that goes back centuries possibly. Why? What is it about the Punjab? What is it about the Sikh community that terrifies the Indian state?
I think it's a value system. The Sikh value system is a threat for India because even when nobody was talking about democracy, Sikh came with the concept of Sarbat Khalsa. Sarbat Khalsa is collective decision making for the community. So we were following highest levels of democracy even in those times when nobody knew about democracy, when voting didn't existed. Other important thing is Sikhs have already displayed the world. If Sikhs will get into governance and in positions of power, they will show the world that they always work on ideas of interfaith, promoting interfaith community. They always work on making a community more inclusive. They always work on making sure there is a fair share for everyone. They always work on making sure there is representation for everyone. And Sikh Raj, Sarkar-e Khalsa or Kingdom of Punjab under Maharaja Ranjit Singh have displayed all these things. The education level was at the highest level. Nobody was given death penalty. There was a good moral education that was also given along with the worldly education. So I think the threat is that if Sikhs come into power again, they will display their values again. And that doesn't align with the, I will say, Indian government value system.
Yeah.
And also another important threat they are facing is right now countries like right now the Western world might need India as their strategic partner to counter some of the China. But if Punjab gets its freedom back, the whole dynamics in the Asian foreign policy will change. So I think they're also feeling threatened about that. And they know some of the bad deeds that they have done, and they have not acknowledged them, and they have not given people closure, they have not delivered justice. So that might also bite them at some point, because countries like America and Canada, they're also good in putting sanctions when it's come to highlighting human rights. So I think these are some of the fear that India is holding, and that's why they act the way they are acting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hugely complex topic, the geopolitical dynamics of the area. And certainly, I think if, for example, if Khalistan was established, there's little doubt that somebody like the US would sponsor it as a nation, and it would use it in return for all sorts of resources and support and financial support, help with building the infrastructure, etc. It would use it as a base, a regional strategic base, militarily and everything. So to me, the US should, in theory, be huge advocates for Khalistan. To me, it makes enormous sense, particularly as India, at the moment, is a questionable ally. It has very close relations to Moscow, and with a potential another term of Narendra Modi, it's likely those relations may strengthen. We know that New Delhi has been supporting Moscow in the recent war in terms of buying its oil, etc. So yeah, it's a huge rabbit hole that maybe we'll save for another video. But I want to come back to maybe some of the more specifics. And one particular element of the Indian state that I found particularly distasteful in all this is a tactic that is deeply undemocratic. And it's a tactic where they have labelled genuine, legitimate political campaigners and activists as terrorists. And you use the word yourself, and you of course, provided evidence of that. Of course, there is a legitimate case to say some people are terrorists if they cause terrorist activities. And there is a fine line between a terrorist and an activist. There is a definite line there. In your opinion, where does that line lie? To you, what takes an activist across that line into a terrorist?
So again, in today's world, I think what Sikh community have chosen to do is to use and display the power of pen. Even though armed struggles are also allowed under United Nations Charter. But they have chosen a smart way, a democratic way. And I agree with you that campaigners who were just campaigning for Sikh referendum were labeled as terrorists. I think that's an attack on the democracy itself. Because if we see with the open mindset, one person is talking about democracy, one person is talking about using democracy as a tool to make their point. On the other side, they are trying to stop that person, defame that person, calling him terrorist, making plots against him, and that clearly shows to what extent India is democratic. If India was a truly democratic country, they should have welcomed the referendum in their country. But they know the consequences, and they know the results of referendum as well. And it's not just Punjab or Kashmir. I think if you do referendum in every state of India, I don't think so more than 4 or 5 states will want it to stick with India at this point. They all have their independence before that. And it was a union that was created in the form of India. And they all have their own cultures, their own language. They have their own resources they want to protect. And the way India is working on the agenda of one country, one language, one religion, that's basically they want to kill the diversity of India. And a lot of states, not just Punjab or Kashmir, a lot of other states also don't like that uniformity that India is trying to create, because they want it to be who they are. They don't want it to be called that we are Hindustani. They want it to be called we are Tamil, we are Bangladeshi people, we are Sikhs, we are Punjabis, we are Kashmiris. So killing the individualities of everyone and putting them under one boat, that's, I think, a very wrong thing for any country to be doing. I think more you protect people's individuality, I think there's more likely they will work with you they will feel more acknowledged, they will feel more respected, and then they probably wanted to work on the development of the country overall. But if they feel threatened about their identity, I don't think so how much they can do for overall health of the country itself. So I think it's a very wrong path that Indian politics have taken. And I hope at some point there will be a better governance in India that can give people a sense of belonging at some point.
Yeah, and I think I'm a great lover of India and its culture and its people. I think the Indian identity is inherent in its diversity, in its all its diverse communities. And I think this drive towards Hindu nationalism is really damaging that really rich culture and rich identity that the nation has. And I think it is damaging on the world stage.
Yeah, but coming to your point, the defined line. And of course, there are different defined lines for different narratives, and different countries have their own, policies and everything. I think for me, the defined line is personally, I'm just speaking on my personal level. If I'm not hurting any innocent person, then I'm good. And I think that's a defined line for me. I think these are some of the moral values that we have gotten from our Sikh history and from our gurus. So I don't think at personal level any Sikh who claim themselves to be a Sikh community leader, or even who claims themselves to be a Sikh, will do something bad to any innocent person. I think it's very important that we have this kind of value system. But again, when it's a time of war, a lot of these things change. And somehow I feel like Sikhs are in war with India right now. And that's the war not started by Sikhs. That's the war imposed by the India on the Sikh community.
Yeah.
And I hope there will be some kind of good resolution on this at some point.
Yeah, I mean, one of the dirty tricks that I've noticed with the Indian state in this so-called war is that, of course, campaigners, Khalistan campaigners particularly, that they have targeted in the diaspora, but of course, because they are remote, they can't actually touch them. They instead have turned on their families, because many of these people have families back in the Punjab. So, of course, the families, the innocent families, family members in the Punjab have been intimidated. They've been subject to all sorts of nastiness from the state and local police enforcement. I believe you've got family back in the Punjab. Is this something that you've experienced?
I am no different than any other Sikh activist in America. We have come to our homes doing investigation and trying to intimidate my parents. And I think that's something they probably do with a lot of Sikhs who are active in their communities. I remember that when I got to know about it, I told my dad, I was like, just tell them to go on my Facebook. And I'm a public figure. Everything is out there anyways. This just really shows that they are coming to my house basically with the intentions of intimidation, because India called itself to be largest nation and this and that, and seems like it's a failure of their intelligence agencies that they don't really know about me, and they're coming to my home and asking my spellings and this and that, and I was like, that's basically just the intimidation that they're trying to do.
Yeah.
But it has been a while. The community is going through all this, so they are very much united, even at our local level in Punjab. So if they do something bad, everybody gets together and they will at least make a point in media. And media is getting stronger too, which is another threat for India overall, because there are a lot of independent media outlets like yours who will talk about things in a very open manner and give opportunity to everyone to talk about different things. So I think That's also very important that we make our media more stronger.
Indeed, yeah. And going back to the media and, of course, legislation surrounding the community, recently the Transnational Repression Policy Act was established. Do you, in your view, think this is a good thing, and do you think it'll work?
So Senate Bill 831, which is Transnational Repression Act, that bill was floated recently. And even though when it was floated, intention was to basically target the transnational repression by China and stuff. But when the hearing happened for the Transnational Repression Act, there was more talking about India than any other country in it. And we also had Sikh representation there. There were members of the World Sikh Parliament. There were members of Sikh Assembly of America. And there was testimony of Sikh Coalition, which is another advocacy organization of Sikh community that was also read into record. So there's a lot of participation that Sikh community showed that actually made to by Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, what happened with the plot against Sikh American by the Indian officials in America. So I think a lot of things were brought up. So what we did from Connecticut, our legislator from Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal, and he's a U.S. senator, he also co-sponsored that bill, and he also did a press conference on hate crime. And we were invited on that press conference. And he highlighted, he was actually the first Senate member who highlighted the plot against Sikh American through the press conference in America before the Senate hearing happened on the Transnational Repression Act. So I think we are trying to demonstrate our response again through democratic way. And we look forward that all the other Sikh organizations who are working with their legislature will also try to this kind of bills that comes to Senate or in House.
Yeah. I'd like really for the next section just to take several steps backwards and take a look at the bigger picture of all this. And if I may play devil's advocate to some degree, for many diaspora countries like the UK here, Canada and the US, India, of course, is hugely important as a regional ally. We've touched on this already. Strategically, it is a buttress against a very belligerent China, shall we say. And of course, 1.4 billion population is an enormous commercial market. So, of course, all these Western democracies are desperate to tie up trade deals with India. So isn't there an argument that risking our relationships in the UK, the US, for example, with India, is it really worth that for what effectively are the issues of a small community?
I think that's the decision making our federal leaders will have to do at some point. They have shown a lot of discomfort recently when the name of India comes in. And for the longest time, they actually don't wanna be dealing with India on a lot of things. But I think it's just the value system that these countries have and what other countries expect from these countries as well. So I don't think so. India is such a big deal that America will lose the support of all the other countries just to stay, in relationship with India. Also, very much the American community itself, if they will feel that their own government is supporting the country which is behind the killing of their own citizen, I don't think so. Even these governments will have to. They might get punished for that, when the election time happens. So I don't think so. I understand your point, and I personally, feel like I wish India was more aligned with the democratic values and it has more respect for human rights. It could be a great ally for everyone, because I understand the 1.4 billion market that you are talking about, but we cannot put our value system on the line for countries. So I think that's the decision making American lawmakers will have to make, or UK lawmakers will have to make, especially when the name of India have came into transnational repression and how they are attacking their own citizen. For these countries, this should be taken as threat to their territorial integrity, because if some other country is killing their citizen, I don't think so any trade deal can offset that. And I think there is enough sense in US about all these issues as well, because this is not just a Sikh issue anymore. It's the issue that Canadian citizen was killed on Canadian soil. The US citizen was about to be killed on US soil. So these things could have serious repercussion if proper justification or proper justice is not given on these matters. It has not just been limited to the Sikh issue anymore. Politics should see this as.
Yeah, I only wish the same sentiments would apply to the UK, because I think there is increasing evidence here in the UK after the very suspicious death of Avtar Singh Kandar earlier last year, shortly after Nijjar. There's been a very apparent suppression of any investigation, lots of obstacles, real intransigence on behalf of the UK state to investigate what clearly was a very suspicious murder in a context of transnational repression. And of course, the UK is in desperate need of a trade deal post-Brexit with India. So yes, unfortunately, those elements maybe are in a different balance in the UK, but time will tell. Moving back to India, and you touched on this a lot already, and the question whether India itself can be seen as a democracy. Now, Narendra Modi obviously is bestriding the world stage, boasting that he leads the world's largest democracy. That is questionable, as you yourself have stated, and there's lots of evidence to prove otherwise. And also, of course, elections coming up this year, and Narendra Modi is probably, according to all the polls and all probability, going to win another term. Firstly, do you think Narendra Modi's version of democracy is a genuine democracy? And what do you think another term could potentially bring to India and to the diaspora? Do you fear it?
I think this election will be a test for the global consciousness. Do they want somebody that divisive to be head of their state, or do they want to bring somebody else who is more inclusive? So I think it will also state, whatever the results are, where the consciousness of Indian people lies. So I won't comment. I just only hope that everything will be done in a democratic fashion, because the way India has been displaying themselves in the world, they are not really behaving as a democracy. So I hope the election commission will be closely watching how they conduct their elections. So I can just only hope for the best, but I think it's more for the test for the consciousness for Indian people. Like I said, if they want somebody like that, who is that divisive, who don't respect human rights, who don't respect diversity, who can provide some comfort level to the minorities.
Okay, so just to wrap up with a final question, which I hope will turn things more positive. The Sikh community and the Sikh religion as a whole, certainly from my own research and investigations into it, it has a very positive message. It is a wonderful religion that is based on some very fine, very impressive principles. And we see it, certainly I've seen it in all sorts of different contexts. Langar, we've already talked about. Of course, every natural disaster, every incident around the world, there is always a Sikh representation. They're handing out food, resources, whatever it is. And they also have this really positive message. Do you think that message is getting out to the wider world? What can you do more to spread this wonderful message from the community?
So I think I take from context from it says Raj bina nahi dharam chale hain. So I think in order to flourish the message of Sikh values, Sikhs needs to be in governance. And it leads back to the point that tea is not just important for the Sikh nation itself, but it is important for the greater good for the world as well. Without having any resources, without having any governance, without having any state, Sikhs have done marvelous job helping the communities all across the world during the times of COVID and even after COVID, before COVID, during farming protests, and even on the daily basis, they are doing their work just to represent who they are. In order to that message to be more flourished, I think creation of Sikh homeland will only just help. And I think that's the only solution if Sikhs want to do something for the greater good, then they can even do more for the whole world. And there's a concept of the Swand for Sikh community members that we donate 10% of our earning towards the good causes. And that could be for any good cause. And if you don't have enough resources, you can donate 10% of your time. And I personally feel our community is doing more than 10%. Some of our members are even just keeping their resources, what they need to pay their bills, and donating rest of it. So I think the display of the Sikh character and Sikh values is on the peak. And if Sikhs will get their sovereignty back, it will be helpful for the whole world.
Excellent message. Swarnjit Singh Khalsa, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
You've been watching a Satluj TV News special. We'll see you next time.